Hey, welcome to Impress the Boss. I'm Catherine.
I'm Laurel.
And I'm Valerie.
And we're here to help you stand out without working overtime. Welcome back to a You're the Boss episode. We've just spent the last 3 weeks learning about Bobe-Yonce, Bobson, and Bobby-Parton. And if you don't know who our workplace characters are, check out episode 17, where we dive into where these characters came from and talk about different workplace personalities. And so this episode's really if you're the boss, if you're a manager, if you have influence, if you lead. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to have someone reporting to you. It's really if you want to create change in your workplace. So Laura, we have a guest with us again. He's a returning guest for us. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who's joining us today?
Yeah, we are so excited to have Dr. John Wilson with us again. And in case you missed episode 21, where we had him with us first, we specifically chose to have John with us for all 3 of these because he has spent the bulk of his 20 years of his career with a company that does not have a traditional hierarchy structure. And so doesn't have bosses, doesn't have direct reports, didn't do performance reviews, just all of those things that are so traditional, and really just had like team members, That's what everybody was to one another. So we really wanted to bring him in for each of these boss episodes, like you just said, to talk about how do you influence, even if you don't have direct report responsibility or, that positional authority. So,
and I think that's important because oftentimes as bosses, we can lean back on, well, that's my direct report. You need to go do this thing I'm telling you to do.
Yeah.
Well, what if you didn't have that authority just to be very transactional and directive, and you really had to influence and cultivate your employee, which is what we should be doing anyway.
That's
so,
right. Yes.
How do we not default to just telling someone what to do, but really bring and encourage them up? And I think John has some good insights for us on that end.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's important for us to bring in the boss's perspective and somebody who has worked with such various types of characters. And I like the fact that we have opened it up to somebody like John, because his insights and where his background and working with all different types of personalities is just, we can take a lot from his points. And I just like that,
Agreed. Yeah, for sure. So with John, just a little bit more info about him in case you didn't listen to the prior episode. So he's been with Vertex, a software company, for over 20 years. He currently serves with them as the director of product management and strategy. They are now a hierarchy company, so he does have direct reports in that role.
And
actually,
a boss.
And a boss. That's right. Yes. Yeah. He has a team of over 100 people in his areas that he oversees. And then he also has his own venture on the side, Strategic Collisions International, where he helps what he labels as accidental entrepreneurs to launch their business ideas and to figure out how to make a go of whatever some thing is that they've kind of stumbled into. And he's had a lot of success in that and has a mastermind group that he does with that. He also is a professor with Drexel University in their entrepreneurship program. So we're really excited to have Dr. John Wilson's perspective with us for these 3 Bobs. All right. Welcome to Impress the Boss. John, thank you so much for joining us again. We are thrilled to have you.
Oh, thanks, Laurel. It is great to be back. Having so much fun being part of the Impress the Boss podcast. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we love the perspective that you bring and are excited in this conversation with you to talk about Bobe-Yonce, Bobson, and Bobby-Parton. And we'll talk about what it looks like what's the best way to influence each of those within the workplace environment. And maybe if you're their colleague or, not necessarily their direct boss, but just how to best influence them. So let's start with Bobe-Yonce. So tell us what your thoughts are about influencing a Bobe-Yonce.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the thing that's interesting about Bobe-Yonce is I've had Bobe-Yonces work for me, with me, and I've worked for them. So we've seen them in all different contexts. But I think it's something interesting about someone who has that confidence of just kind of stepping into a room and taking charge. That taking charge behavior is really a powerful thing. Where it can be tricky is when not everyone's quite ready to follow. Mm-hmm. And so I think when I think of times when I've coached someone who's a Bobe-Yonce, I think a lot of the whole idea of transformational leadership, which I know you're very familiar with, and a piece of that called individual consideration. What I think of for Bobe-Yonce is really having that sensitivity to leading one person at a time. And if you're going to kind of come in and take charge, do it in a way that you really know the person you're dealing with. You engage with them in the way that they like to. And, being direct can be really good. And this, Bobe-Yonce is really good at being direct, but also being fair and being caring and doing that in a way that's really evident. In line with a person's kind of individual preferences, is where that individual consideration, I think, ties that together.
That's great. I love that. Yeah. Gosh, you're taking us back with the individual consideration. I love that. So good.
More eyes. Eh?
Oh, so good. Well, thank you. That's perfect. And how about for Bobson? What would you say is our best way to influence a Bobson?
Yeah, absolutely. So, with a Bobson, I think the risk for a Bobson is that they kind of fade into the background, and the important things they have to say don't get said. I don't know if I talked about this with Bob Dean or not, but I always have this idea, what I call the participation quotient. It's almost like if you're in a meeting or an engagement, it's like divide the time you have by the number of people in the room, and that should give you an idea of how much of the conversation you should be talking versus listening. So, if you're in a 30-minute meeting with 6 people, 5 minutes is about right. Yeah. For a Bob Dean, that can be really hard to contain to that. But with Bobson, I think it's the exact opposite. They could sit through that whole 30 minutes and not say anything and have some really, really great things. Yeah. And those missing comments, those missing engagements, those missing conversations can happen. So I think the way I would want to coach a Bobson is say, engage more. Almost like keep track of that engagement quotient and say, okay, I haven't really participated. Speak up a little bit more, and not just the insights you have, but even helping walk folks through the process and the thinking that they have, because a lot of times they're going to bring that kind of analytical approach or that that thoughtful method, and even being able to share that may spur ideas in others.
Yeah, love it. That's perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Our third one, Bobby-Parton. What are your thoughts about influencing a Bobby-Parton?
Bobby-Parton, you can tell is just, somebody that's really going to have a positive effect on the environment. I think the risk for a Bobby-Parton is that they could get marginalized, almost like, hey, they're the life of the party. They're a fun person, but, they don't really understand our business or our mission or what we're really focused on. And so I think it's really important for someone with that kind of personality to have the self-awareness to realize that it's number one, do very much know the mission, know the business, have that familiarity, but also, have fun and, be, the life of the party at times, but also then zero in and demonstrate how well you understand the business, ask good questions, engage, make sure that it's not just relational, it's also functionally engaged to the business and the priorities. And then the last thing I would say there is to be able to leverage relationships. They are so good at building relationships. Leverage those relationships to really optimize getting work done and bringing the right people together. That's I think some things I would coach a Bobby-Parton.
Bobby-Parton, love it. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Well, we really appreciate you going through Bobe-Yonce, Bobson, and Bobby-Parton with us today. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure as always. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Again, we're just so thankful to have John share his perspectives with us from the boss's point of view and all 3 of these characters of our Bobs. And our takeaway is, how are you going to put into action what John has shared with us and how you influence others, whether you're a boss, a coworker, or just somebody who just makes an influence to anyone. Yeah. And so he brings up some great points.
He does. And I think it's important, the tactical nature of what he brings up. And Valerie, you mentioned this idea of influence. So how do we actually really effectively influence other people? I mean, that's the core of leadership. It's the core of working with other people. And it's what we're all trying to figure out, right? How do I influence my boss? How do I influence the people that I work with as well? So We look forward to hearing your story. If you're a boss, we'd love to hear your perspective on how you manage or work with any one of these Bob personalities. If you're not a boss, but you're really actively trying to influence others, we'd love to hear your tips and tricks if you're trying to influence someone that doesn't directly report to you. So share your story on social. Use the hashtag #ImpressTheBoss. And don't forget to follow John. You'll find him on social media, John H. Wilson. And then also his personal email is in the show notes. He'd be happy to hear from you if you have questions or interested in his consulting or his mastermind group. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to follow us on social for your daily standout tips, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and don't forget to use the hashtag #ImpressTheBoss and share your journey with us. And until next time, Bob's out.